Hi, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's video. I assume that by nature of the fact that you're watching this, you already know some of the history regarding the cult of the fraud who calls himself Nithyananda. But in case you don't, I'll give just the brief recap here. The fraud is somebody who started a public mission in the 2000s claiming to be a very humble, spiritually enlightened master. He established his mission first in India by donning the costume of a renunciant. And I say costume not as an insult to actual sannyasis or sadhus who are renunciants, but because in his case, he was not actually that. He was just playing that role in order to gain followers, to get worshipped, to get money, and to escape whatever he felt was not fulfilling in regular life. So he convinced some people that he was a sincerely enlightened being and hustled his way to California, where he started a temple in Los Angeles. Now, he did something that, like him or know that he's a monster, either way, you have to admit he did something smart as far as a business move is concerned, which is he gave professional development meditation workshops in a number of major corporations, especially those based in California, based in the Silicon Valley. He spoke at Microsoft, he spoke at Oracle, and he really pushed the agenda that in order to succeed in any aspect of life, a person first needs success in their inner space, in their meditative space. And he claimed that he was alive as an incarnation to initiate the world into living enlightenment. So around the time I found him in 2009, this was his main public goal. And of course, the way he spoke was very charismatic, very convincing. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And he said that throughout history, we hear about beings realizing that great depth of inner spirit called enlightenment, but then they retreat into obscurity. Maybe they sit down in a cave in the Himalayas and radiate that divine energy to bless the world, or maybe they drop their mortal coils and ascend into the higher dimensional realm to become one with existence. And while these are beautiful, he said they are not actually practical, and that when we want to see the world raise in vibration and elevate to a new space of possibility, we don't want to just get enlightened and then disappear. We want to live our enlightenment so that every action and interaction we take elevates the community and blesses those around us. An enlightened person in the business world will create a more harmonious business environment and will be bringing greater gifts to the world through their company or through their corporate policies. And so he had a way of making people want to join him, believing because it sounds really good. Who doesn't want to do the best they can possibly do for their community? Whoever has success financially or in the realm of their family or socially, the moment that they feel there's a higher calling and that they're capable of not only being successful, but also being a blessing in the lives of others, most of us would want that. And so the first few people who became really hardcore disciples of this fraud came from the corporate world and already had kind of the lingo established of a corporate success-driven business model. And that's how he created his organization. He had it built up in a similar way to a pyramid scheme. Now, in those early days, he instructed his followers to read Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard. He encouraged them to even go to the Scientology centers to learn how Scientologists do it. and streamline and systematize a similar method to bring people to him. And we can see how this was successful in building his cult. He really followed the playbook of Scientology in order to build his own cult. And what that includes is first offering something totally for free, reaching out to the public, acting as though you're here to bestow a great gift upon humanity, and then once they're sucked in for a free program, upselling them to something that requires a commitment, so a time commitment as a volunteer, and a financial commitment, putting a price tag to it. In the case of Scientology, that could be a free auditing session, followed up by pay this money to take a course, and so on and so on. In the cult of Nithyananda, that meant go to a temple, join one of the free worship ceremonies, go online, do one of the free kriyas or one of the free yoga classes that's offered. And then if you feel benefited by that, and I want to point something out here, if you haven't developed a yoga practice, it's guaranteed that when you try yoga, you will experience your body in a new way. You'll feel a new sort of flexibility awakening. You might discover targeted muscle groups that you haven't targeted before. It is going to add something surface level positive to your physical health. And similarly, if you've never meditated before and you find the ability to sit and silence your mind and feel a depth of connection with something beyond the everyday perceived reality, you're going to enjoy it. It's actually quite addictive. It's a beautiful state to experience. Now, neuroscience has some mixed feelings about whether or not this is actually beneficial, but for the layman, for somebody like me, maybe even somebody like you, the first time we have a really cool meditation experience, we enjoy it. It feels good. It feels like something we want to explore further. And naturally, whoever has offered us that experience will have an innate level of trust towards them. And so he built up his mission following the formula established in Scientology, which is offer something for free, prove that it's been beneficial. In other words, does your body feel good after this yoga? Do you feel relaxed after this meditation? Does this discourse given to you for free give you a further insight into how you can achieve success in your life? Do you want to be somebody who blesses your community? And then once a person is hooked with these free gifts, remember, nothing is actually free. If somebody says, here's a free sample, they want you to buy the full-size product. If a group or organization gives you a free seminar, they want to upsell you into a deeper level of commitment. And the more you commit, the more you show you're willing to buy, the higher the price tag gets, and the more of a demand on your time and your life is required of you. And so he would lure people in like that, eventually relocating many of these people to India, where they lived with him in an ashram outside of a town called Bidadi, near Bangalore, which is South Asia's largest growing city. It's like the Silicon Valley of India. And so he built up this ashram using people who he describes as high achievers. He wasn't interested in getting followers who just wanted a nice meditative experience and to live in that place of love and light. He wanted people who were driven, economically focused, and able to manifest money for him. Money was always the primary agenda. Now, why I think it's important to give this bit of a background before I get into today's discussion is that a lot of people bought his bullshit when he made the claim that he's just a simple village boy, a simple sannyasi, he doesn't want anything from you. He only wants to enrich you with what he has to offer. And this goes back to the early days of his cult. as soon as anybody voiced a resistance towards the high pressure sales tactics he would put people into when he was trying to get them to pay for a $6,000 program or a $10,000 program, or most recently a $21,000 program, he would counter their resistance with an explanation that, in a way, if you trust him, you can bend your logic to accept it, but once you know his real agenda, you realize how messed up it actually is. So he would tell us that in the ancient times, in order for a person to be able to meet an enlightened master or a genuine guru, they would have to do tapas. They would have to give things up in their life in order to purify their inner space. And that the gurus could only be found on the tops of mountains. And so they would have to go on a genuine pilgrimage and climb a high Himalayan peak in order to reach the feet of the master. And he said, in the modern era, a financial sacrifice is the current equivalent to giving up the world and climbing a mountain. A lot of people fell for that and believed that the money that they were giving was not for him. He's just a poor, humble village boy who's a sannyasi, and he doesn't touch money. He's renounced it. So they believed their money was going towards building a school, building a hospital, and building a temple. These are the three things he claimed the donations would go towards. Now, if you do a little bit of research into this cult, you'll discover that in 2009, somebody in California sued him and won a $1.5 million case on the grounds of fraud and racketeering. Because even way back then, when he started his cult, he claimed he was going to build a Vedic library, took millions of dollars from people who believed in that, because he's quite charismatic and quite convincing and very manipulative with his language. And when he didn't make good on his promise, when he basically took the money and ran, they were able to get their money back by suing him for racketeering. Now, side note, do I think there should be a class action lawsuit taken out against him by everyone who paid into Sarvagnapita and Karta? Yes, I most certainly do. I don't have the legal brain to run such a thing, but if you're watching this and you do, let me know. Maybe we can work something out. But anyway, back to the point of this video. He has been a fraud from the beginning. He raped a woman named Arti Rao who went to him as a volunteer because she believed in this grandiose mission he described, that if he can bring 100,000 people into the space of living enlightenment, planet Earth will be elevated to a new state of vibration. She didn't go to him with the intention of developing a sexual relationship with an enlightened master. She went believing that any success she had in the material world paled in comparison to the good that could be done through reviving the Vedic civilization. And the guru-disciple relationship was the way to do that, and he took advantage. And if you haven't already watched her interviews on YouTube from that time around 2011, 2012, when she spoke to the media, listen to them, because she describes step by step how he was able to sexually abuse many of his disciples, myself included, friends of mine included, and I've recently discovered, sickeningly, children included. He has sexually abused kids as young as 12 years old. Again, going back to the 2008-2009 era, and these were kids of some of his close inner circle disciples, like somebody who he recruited from Oracle, who came from a corporate background, gave up everything, donated all his money to this fraud, brought his wife, brought his kid, and the fraud molested his child. And I feel like a lot of these people have never gone public because they see the way this organization attacks whistleblowers. Lennon Karupan, who leaked the video with Ranjita and Nithyananda to Sun TV, has been harassed through false rape cases in India. The fraud has gotten female disciples of his to accuse Lennon of rape. They have gone to the extent of kidnapping him from outside of courthouses, roughing him up, threatening his life. There was a boy pushed to suicide who very sadly killed himself on a Facebook Live video after he escaped the cult when he was preparing to go public. And of course, Aarti Rao herself has been the target of their smear campaigns. They've destroyed her character through social media attacks and through litigation bullying. If you look at any cult that gets attacked, the way that they counter the so-called attack is by going after the reputation of the whistleblower. And the reason I say attacked with air quotes is that revealing the truth about somebody who has lied to you is not an attack. Being lied to is getting attacked. Being raped is an attack. Being swindled of money and financially exploited is an attack. Forcing children to beat the shit out of each other and blaming them for your failure is an attack. Finding out that these attacks have happened and then telling the public, hey, watch out, this is a predator, this is a dangerous organization, this man is out to hurt your kids and to steal from you, that's not an attack, that's a public service. And so when it comes to the question of why not just move on in your life? Why do you have to be full of hate? Why do you have to go after this man? So you didn't get what you wanted when you went to see him. Why are you trying to sever the connection between him and his other disciples? This is why. Because he is not taking care of his disciples with their best interest at heart, leading them to enlightenment. He is promising them things he has no capacity or intention of delivering. He is swindling them. He is abusing children, which for me is the sickest thing that he's doing. And he's using people for his own greed. Now, one of the things that he told people when I left the organization in order to defame my character and to start like an internal smear campaign against me so that nobody would believe me when I said that he forced the kids to beat each other, he claimed that I left because I wasn't getting enough attention from him. He said that I've become abusive towards him because I didn't get enough attention. Now, why this is so stupid and so wrong is that I left at the height of him giving me so-called attention. He had made me what he called the Western face of his organization. So every single day I had to dress up, stand on a stage, introduce him, and be seen as the person in the spotlight. Behind the scenes, he was sending me Facebook Messenger messages, kind of sexting with me, calling me a goddess, calling me his Shakti, telling me he wanted to be with me forever, even up until the day that I physically actually ran away from his center in order to get my life back. Even up until that day, he was still sending me messages trying to convince me that he's working with the UN and that he's going to have his own nation and that he wants me to live with him in Kailasa. And so telling people that I left because I wasn't getting enough attention is a textbook example of how a narcissist deflects away from an empath who escapes the narcissistic abuse. If you're in a toxic relationship with somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder and they've manipulated you, they've abused you, they've gaslit you, they've made you feel as if you're attacking them when you point out their abusive behavior, and then eventually you have enough and you leave, that narcissist will never be able to accept responsibility for the mistakes they made or the damage they did to you in that relationship. And so they'll tell people, that person left me because they were too selfish, they were too greedy, they wanted more from me than what I was able to give. And that's the way they do damage control to protect their own fragile ego that can't accept the fact that they made false promises that they didn't fulfill on a lesser extent, or that they created actual physical, harmful, damaging abuse, financial exploitation, or inflicted trauma. In the worst case scenario, as in with this cult of the fraud who calls himself Nithyananda. When a narcissist accuses you of attacking them, what they're actually accusing you of doing is exposing them. And so I want to make it very clear, I have never attacked Nithyananda. I have never tried to sever the connection between a guru and his disciples. What I have done was shed light on the reality of the sinister, criminal, abusive, fraudulent, psychopathic monster who is claiming to be a guru. If you come between somebody and their spiritual path because you don't want to see them get enlightened, or you don't want to see them succeed beyond your level of success, or you feel like you want to destroy them for some sick pleasure, that would be wrong. And that's what the Guru Gita refers to when it says that the most harmful thing a person can do is come between a disciple and a guru. It's not talking about a predator in saffron robes and helping people see that what they're feeding into is a cycle of abuse. Now, I've had people comment on my videos even recently, which leads me to believe these are brainwashed followers of his, people who have bought his bullshit, saying, okay, so you had a bad experience in that organization. Why are you still dwelling on it? That's such a negative thing to do. It's such a low vibrational thing to do, to keep yourself in this negative mentality where you're still thinking about it. Here's the reality. Knowing the fact that he has abused many people who are too scared to go public, and knowing the fact that even as I speak in this moment, even as you hear this message, watching this video in this moment, he is abusing people. He is trafficking people. He is sex trafficking. He is also trafficking through forced labor. He is terrorizing families, turning children against their parents, grooming kids who are underage into lives of sexual subservience towards him, instructing disciples to beat people in order to gain their compliance, lying about people, putting false cases on people, attacking someone like me through targeted social media harassment where he's falsely accused me of everything from assassination attempts to rape, of which I am innocent on all fake accusation counts. Knowing that he is constantly traumatizing and terrorizing people means that I can't just sit back and give up and say, well, you know what, I had a shit experience, but maybe he's good for other people. No way. I know that everyone who is following him is to some degree being victimized by him. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that they can't believe he's actually sexually active because he tells the world celibacy is the only way for seekers to realize enlightenment. I've heard people swear up and down there's no way those Gurukul kids had been beaten because they're always smiling, because they act so happy, because they've seen the conditions he promised the Gurukul would experience, and he has said no teacher will ever even yell at them because they are yoga purushas, they are special, they are above getting disciplined. He has found a way to convince people of his innocence while laughing behind their backs and inflicting unspeakable harm and damage on others. Now, if you're one of those people and you're watching this video out of curiosity, because let's face it, you've got to be curious. Even if you still believe in that fraud, you must be curious about why people like me are so consistently adamant that he is bad, that he deserves a life of imprisonment, and that his cult needs to be taken down, you must be wondering, what's the real harm in it if you've never personally been hurt? And I have a question for you. If you are still his disciple, is whatever feeling connection you have with the persona he projects towards you worth turning a blind eye towards children who have been scarred for life through physical, violent attacks against them? If you knew firsthand, if a Gurukul child came to you the way they came to me and cried and said, I'm scared to go back to Bengaluru Adinam because I don't want to get beaten again, would you be able to say, well, that's your experience, but my experience is different, so if you don't want to be there, that's fine, but I want to be there? Would you actually be so heartless and so cold that you would prioritize whatever false promises he has given you over the quality of life and safety of kids? Because this is what he's doing. He is creating a greed in people by promising that one day they're going to have enlightenment, or they are going to be recognized for their contribution to humanity, that one day his ashram is going to be like a palace and they're going to have a room in the mansion if they stay with him now and keep giving him money and keep praising him and ignoring the whistleblowers, convincing them to attack people like me and others like Arti and Lenin, who have been constantly speaking out and trying to warn the public. Is it worth it to you to get whatever he has promised you if that means children will be suffering? If that means people are going to be financially exploited? If that means innocent families are going to be separated and kids are going to be trafficked and they're going to be forced to lie to the cameras about their parents, the way Nandita and Lopamudra have been forced to do? At what point are you going to realize enough is enough? When a kid finally comes public to talk about the way he sexually groomed them and molested them at 12, and then raised them while taking money and devotion from their parents, when that finally comes out, is that going to be enough? Or are you willing to look into your own heart and accept the fact that, hey, maybe you were wrong about this guy, and leave before he uses more of your money to fund his illegal empire? What he's doing is so much more sinister and so much more serious than even I knew on September 11th of 2019 when I first blew the whistle about the Gurukul beatings. Since then, I've had so many more kids reach out to me in private messages. I've spoken to so many other disciples of his, ex-disciples of his, who were traumatized beyond the level of trauma I endured at his hands. And if I were to just buy into the toxic positivity bullshit being promoted by New Agers and cult leaders to just move on with my life and focus on happy things and focus on positive things and just leave all of this negativity behind me, I would be doing what so many others did when they left leadership roles in his cult because they found out about the abuse behind the scenes, which is enabling the toxicity to perpetuate. When people come to me and say it's negative to keep talking about this fraud, you're feeding into the negative agenda that's trying to separate us, blah, 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 bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. What I have to say is this: if everyone who feels the love in their heart that I feel, who feels that it's important to be a good person, ignored everyone who's criminally exploiting and abusing others, we would be enabling them to perpetuate that abuse. There have been people like the first and the second Mom Anisha who had very high-level roles in his cult, who were leading programs, who were training others, who were recruiting people in, who have quietly left over the years and said nothing. They've ghosted his so-called Sangha. They've never spoken out about what they witnessed or what pushed them to make the decision to leave. There are parents who found out that their kids were sexually abused, who didn't like it and who quietly left the organization, but who moved on with their lives, and now their kids are traumatized and their kids are suffering and their kids are scared to go public because they think their parents will be mad at them. Talk about victim shaming. There are people who are shit scared because they know that if they speak up and they go public, if they're in India, he could send goons to their doors to attack them. He could put false cases against them. He could destroy their lives. Or they're scared that he'll do towards them what he's done to me, which is militarize his followers to start campaigns on social media falsely accusing me of really sinister criminal acts, essentially to destroy my reputation or to destroy my character. Not everyone feels so driven to expose his criminality that they're willing to sacrifice their reputation. Not everyone is willing to stand in that kind of a line of fire. And so if you're one of those people out there saying, just move on with your life, let it go, drop it, what you're basically saying is this: okay, so he rapes kids, so what? Why don't you just forget about it and be happy? Let me tell you, I'm vegan, which means I love animals, and I could not live with myself happily if I knew that my food choices or my makeup choices or my clothing choices required the sacrifice of the lives of animals or torture towards animals. I'm not the kind of person who can just separate my actions from the horrors that are going on in the world. I'm not the type of person to keep my mouth shut when I see injustice is taking place. Now, I may not be able to do something about all the injustices going on. I had somebody comment, you know, people are being killed in the streets in Ukraine. Why don't you talk about that instead of talking about this guru? I don't have firsthand experience or global political knowledge to actually do anything beneficial to help those people in the Ukraine. My heart goes out to them. I hope Putin is stopped. I hope the war is brought to an end. But there's nothing I can do to help push that ending. Whereas in the case of this cult, I know firsthand what his criminal activities actually are. I have a network of other victims who are talking behind the scenes who also understand the necessity to bring down what he is trying to build up, which is essentially a human trafficking ring, an illegal encroachment on countries that shouldn't be stuck with a criminal like him. He's trying to avoid the rape case in India that has been delayed for over a decade. And he's using people, abusing people, stealing money from people, claiming he's going to do one thing with it, but doing something else. So back in 2008 in California, he swindled people out of millions of dollars, promising that he was going to build a Vedic library, and he didn't do it. He took the money and ran. Now, he's not only taking the money and running, but he's taking the money and running away from the law. And he has entrapped so many innocent souls who he's taking along on the ride with him. If you've seen anything on his social media referring to the so-called ambassadors of Kailasa, these people who he claims are members of his Hindu nation government to further the agenda of Hinduism to humanity, these are not people who have a high level of respect in global political scenes. These are brainwashed followers who he is trafficking around the world to places in South America, to places in Africa, where they're being put in dangerous confrontational situations, trying to bully governments of those countries into accepting their cult leader as the leader of a nation. They're trying to get land donations, they're trying to get political promises, they're trying to get asylum for him. Don't think for a moment that his goal is to help humanity. Just like in the early days when he said his goal was living enlightenment, but in actuality, he wanted to create a Hindu-colored version of Scientology. Right now, he's claiming his goal is to so-called save Hinduism, and he's using the so-called Kailasa nation and all the trumped up false claims of UN protection to try to do it. That's not actually his goal. His goal is indemnity. Back in 2015, in October, he had a program in Varanasi called Inner Awakening. And this was shortly after I took the initiation into Brahmacharyam, which is basically becoming a Hindu nun in his organization. And behind the scenes one day, he called a few of us to sit with him in the green room at the hotel where he was hosting this program. And he told us something that in retrospect is very chilling. He said that when he was 10 years old, his yoga teacher called Raghupati Yogi had given him a special tantric initiation at Arunachala with the promise that it would give him romance with everything. And he said in order to give that initiation, Raghupati Yogi, who was an elderly man, took him as a 10-year-old boy and stuck his tongue in his mouth. Those are the words he used. He didn't say he French kissed me. He said he put his tongue in my mouth. And that when the encounter ended, Rajashekaran, as a young boy, opened his eyes, looked at the trees, looked at the plants, looked at the hill in front of him, and he felt as if he was in love with everything. Now, I don't know if that incident really took place because Raghupati Yogi died years ago. If you notice all of his childhood stories about Kupamal, Raghupati Yogi, Arunagiri Yogeshwara, they're all people who are not alive to confirm and corroborate his stories. Everyone who he claims recognized him as an incarnation or initiated him in his young age, none of them are alive anymore. His mother is maybe the only adult from his life back then still alive, but if you ask her point blank, tell me about him when he was a kid, tell me about this story that he told us, she'll say, I don't know about any of that. Verbatim, this was actually what she said to me once when I said, tell me about Swamiji when he was a kid. What was it like when he would go to the temple from morning till night, when he would do hours of Surya Namaskar, when he converted a Christian teacher to Hinduism? Tell me about his childhood. She'd say, I don't know about any of that. That means she doesn't corroborate his tall tales of divinity. Anyway, I digress. He told us that this elderly man French kissed him and that the kiss was his initiation into romance with everything. And at that point, I must have made a face of some kind because the part of me that is hardwired to recognize a predator and recognize somebody who is abusing kids, recognize somebody who is disgusting must have kicked in because he said, hey, Swarupa Priya, your dirty Western mind is not able to recognize the beauty of that expression. And in that moment, my critical thinking towards the whole idea of pedophilia shut off because he's somebody I had believed was an enlightened avatar, and now he's telling me an elderly man sticking his tongue in the mouth of a 10-year-old kid is good. And it's my dirty Western perverted logic that paints it as bad. And he went on with a few other examples of times when his gurus had beaten him, times when they had forced him to go without sleep for days and nights on end. And then he said something, this is what I find really chilling. he said that the only reason he is not able to raise the kids in his gurukul the way these so-called masters had raised him is that the law of the land forbids it. And even back then in 2015, he told us his goal was to get an island, get the rights to call it an island nation, create his own laws, make sure there's no extradition treaty with India, and then bring all of his Gurukul kids and all of his disciples to his island nation where he can run it exactly as per his desires. And so that means the way he's trying to create Kailasa and get an island and get some country without extradition to India to donate land to him with an intention of bringing his disciples there, bringing kids there, it's so that his perversions can run amok. He can abuse every man, woman, and child he feels a sexual desire towards. He can beat people however he wants. He can restrict their sleep. He can restrict their diets. He can work them like slaves while living in luxury himself. When he travels, and I've seen this firsthand when I would go to programs like the Inner Awakening in Varanasi or something he called Nithyananda in Thailand, he would torture the travel team who went with him to find him presidential suites and to make sure that he had the most luxurious room in any resort. No expense was ever spared to ensure that he had the best ocean view. I remember in Thailand, like, the specific details he gave for the view of the beach he needed from his suite were impossible to actually find, and yet he made them mandatory. He spares no expense for his private jet, for the villas that he stays in, for his clothing, for his jewelry, for his hairstyles, for his fake ass eyelashes, which I find it would be laughable if people weren't being tortured by him. He spares no expense for his own greed, and yet the people he's trafficking to try to make this island nation of Kailasa into a reality are denied the basic necessities of life. My friend Lainey, who I interviewed about a year ago, she's about to start a blog called Ovia Escaped, and I can't wait to read it. Her slave name in that cult was Ovia. She described when she went to clean up the mess he left behind in the luxury villa where he stayed in Ecuador. She said that when they were cleaning up the room that he had lived in, they found wrappers for foods that were non-veg. They found stuff that was forbidden from anybody in his cult to eat, but he was eating all of it. And it's something I've experienced too. I mean, he banned garlic and onion from the beginning because they're not part of a sattvic diet, but the dude had garlic breath half the time. I would have to sit in his room and massage his feet. Like, it's just gross. It's gross, guys. The hypocrisy is gross. But I'm not here to gossip about how gross he is. I'm here to try to save people from falling into the trap that I had fallen into, to try to help the kids who can't speak up for themselves because their parents are still worshiping the rapist who assaulted them. Somebody has to do it. And so if you've bought into that toxic positivity crap where you think that if somebody is abused by somebody else, they should just move on with their life and enjoy and be happy again, stop it. Just stop it. Toxic positivity is a term I've come across online in the past year or so that refers to kind of the influencer culture or the MLM marketing structures where people are told only present the happiest stuff to the world. Only talk about your successes, forget about your failures. Only talk about your healthy, beautiful, mutually beneficial relationships. Never paint yourself as a victim because that's going to drag down your space and it's going to blah, blah, blah. This kind of toxic positivity ran rampant in the cult of the fraud Nithyananda. For example, he would tell us, and this is a direct verbatim quote, he would say, "You cannot be violated. Anytime you feel you have been violated, you are violating yourself by using the word violation." This is the kind of like twisted, tangled logic he would use to gaslight his victims. He told us there's no such thing as rape. He told us that in the agamas of Sadashiva, the only things that are considered crimes are things that destroy life. In other words, murder and suicide. Those are the only crimes. Sexuality, he claimed, could never be a crime. There was even a time when he tried to get me and others within what he called the Rudra Kanya team to make videos about the casting couch issue and the Me Too movement from the context of Vedic spirituality, Vedic feminism. And I'll never forget the mind fuck that experience was. I made a video with a heartfelt congratulations to Rose McGowan and the other brave actresses who stood up against Harvey Weinstein, and praised them for having the strength and the courage to go forward against a man who had more power in their industry than they themselves had. And the next day, Tatwa Priya came up to me and said, "You should take down that video that you made. Swamiji says you missed the point." And then I saw what Jaya and Vijaya and Sadashiva Priya were saying in their takes on the casting couch. In fact, I feel like they didn't ever publish them because they felt it was weird. But their take was that Cosmos doesn't recognize rape. The agamas of Sadashiva don't consider sexual violation to be a crime. You can never be violated, so essentially victim shaming, telling these brave actresses that they were in the wrong. In any case, he would do the kind of mind warp towards us where what we knew instinctively was right, he would call it wrong. And then through the lens of toxic positivity, he would encourage us to stay quiet about what we knew was criminal. He would tell us, if you call yourself a victim, you are victimizing yourself. So why is it that when people leave his organization, they don't want to go public? Because somewhere in the back of their minds, if they haven't gone for therapy, if they haven't studied the dynamics of mind control or brainwashing, if they haven't deprogrammed or had professional help through their deprogramming process and really analyzed how their mental inner space was hijacked, they might still be holding on to some of the concepts he preached, such as, it's wrong to be a victim. You can never be violated. Sannyas is the ultimate freedom. Here's another piece of bullshit he tried to feed everybody. He said that decision fatigue is the biggest pain being suffered by humanity right now. And that if you're constantly struggling to make the decision of what to eat for breakfast and which clothing to wear and how to style your hair, then you are suffering under the tyranny of the Western Maya matrix. But if you take sannyas, if you surrender your life and all of your decisions to him and live only to serve him, you will be freed from the torture of decision fatigue, because he'll tell you what to wear, how to do your hair, what to eat, where to live, when to sleep, when to wake up, what work to do, and you can never be violated, so don't worry, you'll be free from violation. He would feed us enslavement and call it freedom. The toxic positivity he would wash that with is telling us, if you ever choose to leave, that is your choice, but never come between another disciple and their guru. Whatever bad experience you had, that was between you and your guru, but it's not your place to step between somebody else and their guru. So if you're one of his currently brainwashed followers, and I'm sorry if that word is triggering, I shouldn't say brainwashed because you'll take that as an insult, even though I'm the first to admit I was also brainwashed by him. Just for a second, let go of the ego barrier that is trying to defend the fact that you are trapped in his cult. Yes, it is a cult. Let go of that defensiveness and just hear me out for a minute. What happened between me and my so-called fraud of a guru is not different than what's happening between you and that same imposter claiming to be your guru. You may not have been sexted by him, or he may not have asked you to send him a nude selfie as collateral the way he demanded from me and others. He may not have ordered you to get a tattoo the way he ordered me and many others. He may not have branded your arms. He may not have forced you to cut your finger and give a blood signature promising to die for him the way he did to me and many others. But if you're even just listening to his discourses online and letting his messages sink in, on some level, he is claiming your time, your energetic inner space, demanding your subservience. And he will pressure you to pay money for services that are actually useless to you, but financially beneficial for him. He is not interested in helping you. He either wants your money, your services as a volunteer, or your body for his disgusting, lustful pleasure. Now, I'm not trying to shame people who have lust, or people who are in relationships, or people who couple up consensually. But when there's a great disparity in power between a person demanding or initiating or requesting or really sweetly inviting a sexual connection and the person being lured in other words, if a CEO of a company approaches an intern and asks for a sexual relationship, that is harmful. That is wrong, because there will never be a partnership of equality between the two of them. The one who's in a lesser position within the company hierarchy will feel as if whatever the person of authority says has to go. It can never be consensual, because they'll feel like maybe there will be a negative repercussion if they say no. Similarly, when this fraud Nithyananda asked the 17-year-old girl once to have sex with him and she said no, she was then punished by Ranjita and Pranapriya and Madhvait and told that she, an innocent young kid, had abused him by denying him. That's the kind of overt sexual predatory sickness that he inflicts on his followers. If you feel like he's benefited your life because maybe you had a beautiful experience in one of the meditations, or your body has gained a new level of flexibility through the yoga, or something that he said in a discourse clicked in your inner space and you've had a better time in your life since internalizing that teaching, I am not trying to take that away from you. I'm not saying that nothing he has taught in his cult was good, because I myself got lured in after reading the book Living Enlightenment and feeling like a lot of it clicked. I got lured in when knee pain I had struggled with got more tolerable and had less of a negative effect on my life after doing the yoga. I fell for it too, and I still to this day agree, yeah, the yoga was good, I liked it. However, it's no different than a person getting sucked into a billion-year contract as a servant of the cult of Scientology because something in Dianetics was helpful for them. It's a repackaging of basic methods used within Zen Buddhism, within Hinduism, and within pop psychology that he then takes credit for. He did not invent any of the asanas or any of the yoga flows being taught as so-called Nitya Yoga. They're in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. They're in the Shiva Sutras. He had teams of Sanskrit scholars translating the verses. He had people on the yoga team creating those flows. He just takes credit for their hard work. So if you felt benefited by that, the credit actually goes to you. You're the one who did the exercise. The same way, if you felt something mystical happened during the Nitya Dhyan meditation, in fact, what you did was Osho's dynamic meditation, but repackaged as Nitya Dhyana. If you felt benefited by one of his discourses, you can thank Manyanatma Swami, who sat in the tech pit, putting on a teleprompter in the tech pit the lines that he was to touch on, read, and claim as his own discourse during that satsang. He himself is just the greedy, predatory, narcissistic psychopath running the place. He is not the one who gave you those experiences. If you felt like you had a Kundalini awakening, if you felt that you had a vision, a mystical experience, if you had what could be called a satori, which is like a glimpse of the eternal space, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm saying it happened because of you. Because you did the meditations, you did the spiritual practice, you surrendered on some level to what you believe to be divinity. And with that openness in your heart, the experience was bestowed upon you, not from him, but in spite of him. I remember back in 2009, the first inner awakening that I went to, I think it started October of 2009. He said in one of the first sessions, he told us a story of a master going out on a rowboat with some of his close inner circle disciples. And they went out onto the water in this rowboat, and some of the senior disciples were making fun of the newest recruit. They were just teasing this guy, saying, you realize, like, our master has initiated all of us to be able to walk on water. We can all do it. Can you? You should prove it to us. And that disciple was so sincere in his devotion, so genuine in his belief, so innocent. In retrospect, I would say gullible, but so innocent that he believed them. He believed that those senior disciples could all walk on water because the master initiated them to. He believed the master was divine. And so the master, hearing this drama going on with the disciples, asked for something from the shore. And that young new recruit stood up, walked across the water to the shore, picked up what the master asked for, walked back, and handed it to him. And everyone was shocked because the older guys were just hassling him. They couldn't actually walk on water. They were just teasing the new guy, but damn, he actually did it. So the master thought, wow, if my disciple can do this, and he's done it because of his belief in me and because of my power, imagine what I can do. So the master got out of his boat, stepped onto the water, sunk and drowned. And what he told us back then in 2009, which I feel was almost his way of winking at us and telling us our experiences were because of us, not him. What he said was, if a sincere seeker goes to an unqualified guru, even if their guru isn't actually enlightened, the sincere seeker can get enlightened through their belief. And he said it's the disciple that makes the master, not the other way around. And so if you feel like that fraud has given you a satori, has given you a shakti, has given you a kundalini awakening, he himself, in his own words in 2009, admitted to the farce. He admitted that it's the sincerity of the seeker, not the divinity of the master, that creates these mystical experiences. And so if you're being lied to by Niti or by his inner circle people or by other members of Sangha who believe in him, and they're saying, you know, trust your experience. Don't listen to that Sarah Landry. Don't listen to the whistleblowers. Don't believe Arti Rao. Don't believe the kids in Gurukul who are traumatized from getting beaten. Trust the power of your experience. What I'm trying to tell you is not forget your experience. That was hypnosis. I'm not saying it was hypnosis. I'm still a believer in spirituality. If you had a 360-degree vision experience, I believe you. If you had a Satori, a Kundalini awakening, a glimpse of the eternal, timeless space that's beyond sight and sound, and you felt you merged with divinity, awesome! I want to hear about it. Let's talk. Hit me up. I'm happy for you. What I'm here to say is not that your experiences were fake. What I'm here to say is your goodness, your purity, your devotion created those experiences. Not the rapist who sits on his golden throne laughing at all of us, yelling at people for not doing enough for him, demanding more money, strutting around in his false eyelashes and gold spray tan fake skin color with his fake hair extensions and his $1 million villas where he stays. He did not give you those experiences. You gave them to yourself and attributed them falsely to him. So look in your heart. You don't have to give up your spiritual path in order to recognize the fact that the abuse should not be perpetuated. It's not dwelling on negativity to stand up for victims who are suffering. There's nothing negative about speaking the truth. Exposing a criminal is not attacking somebody. The only person who feels like you're attacking them by telling the truth is somebody who is trying to live a lie. And so if he says that I'm attacking him, he's exposing himself. He's telling you flat out that he is a narcissist. He is a psychopath. He is a liar, and he is a criminal. By nature of the fact that they have never addressed the actual issues, the rape of Arti Rao, the beatings of the kids, the illegal escape from India without a valid passport, whatever fake travel documents he's traveling on, by nature of the fact that he only sits on his throne with a green screen behind them, claiming to be in Kailasa while avoiding the actual issues. That should be the red flag of all red flags that lets you know to stop supporting him and stop funding him. Now, I know for a lot of you, if you've put a lot of time into your devotion, if you've lived every crazy rule he's given you, you've stopped eating when he says be a nirahari, you've stopped sleeping when he says be in the space of kutakesha, you've cut out your relatives who love you because he says don't entertain relationships with anyone who's against your guru. If you feel like you've invested too much and you're not willing to leave him now because you've put so much time, money, and energy into him, does the fact that you've spent too much of your time and money on a sinking ship mandate your continued sitting on that ship? Are you going to just wait to drown with him? Save yourself. Jump on a lifeboat. People who paid to ride the Titanic paid a pretty penny back in 1912 to ride that luxury liner. But when the ship was sinking, the people who knew it was sinking rushed to a lifeboat to try to save themselves. But sadly, many drowned with the ship. The cult of the fraud who calls himself Nithyananda is sinking. Are you going to justify sinking with it by the amount of thousands of dollars you paid for his programs, or the hours and hours you invested listening to his discourses, or are you going to get on a lifeboat? Now, on a very serious note, my fear for the future of this cult, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, because I don't want people to die innocent people who went there with all devotion, with good intentions, with a spiritual heart. I don't want to see this happen to them, but I really fear he is going to create another Jonestown. He already has an Epstein Island fantasy. He has already told us that he wants an island nation with sovereignty to him, without any extradition towards any other legal entities in the world. He wants to be above the law. He wants the freedom to molest kids at will. He wants the freedom to beat whoever he chooses. That's bad enough. But if you look at what happened in Jonestown, the crazy Jim Jones started restricting his disciples who were there more and more and more. I read a report about this once shortly after I escaped Nithyananda and threw myself into studying cult dynamics and the workings of the psychopath mind. I started reading the mind control manual about how people get systematically entangled with cult leaders like this. And one thing that was explained about Jonestown was that towards the end of the cult, leading up to the mass suicide, Jim Jones started getting more strict about the diets of his followers. He started saying, the Bible doesn't mention carrots, so we can't eat carrots anymore. Get them out of the compound. He started dictating the colors people could wear based on what was biblical and what wasn't, or based on what he claimed God was telling him, and then using the Bible as an excuse for that. Very eerily and very similarly, Nithyananda has created the same dietary and clothing restrictions through the Bhagashastra. He has actually said, tomatoes are not in the Bhagashastra, so nobody can eat them. Wheat is not in the Bhagashastra. Yeast is not in the Bhagashastra. He'll go through lists of foods he wants to deprive his disciples from consuming, and he will forbid them from eating those things, using ancient scripture as his excuse for the restrictions. He forces everyone to have the same kind of haircut, to wear the same kinds of colors, to keep the same disturbing sleep patterns, to be 24 freaking hours a day on a Zoom call so they are constantly monitored. He wants people to do hourly reports about what they've accomplished so he can be sure as a slave driver that his slaves are always running for him. And it is so creepy to see the parallels between Nithyananda and Jim Jones. What really scares me, though, is the fact that he has pushed self-sacrifice and death as a priority for as long as I've known him. In 2010, I was in his ashram for something called the Living Enlightenment Process. It was a so-called free gift, but remember, nothing's ever free. There's always a trap if something's given as free. He gave us this free 60-day program saying that we were going to really anchor the living enlightenment into our lives for attending this program. And towards the beginning, there was a day when the participants were all sitting in the hall, and a man called Bhakta Swami, who was then one of the cult leaders, came to the stage and told all of us, they're trying to kill Swamiji. And Swamiji is what they call that fraud Rajashekaran. He said they're trying to kill Swamiji. The police are threatening to come. They're going to arrest him. They're going to take him to prison again. And we can't let that happen. And he was crying. And he was telling all of us this is a real emergency. Who here loves Swamiji? And we all, oh yeah, we love him, we love him. And he was saying, who here wants to make sure that nobody kills our Swamiji? And of course, everyone's jumping up like, yeah, what can we do? That's when he made each of us cut our fingers and put blood prints on a piece of paper with our signature, swearing that we would fast till death. if he was arrested again until he was released. So that kind of toxic blood death pact was already being suggested as early as 2010. And since then, and I have to say, I was one of those people. I cut my finger. I put a bloody signature on that page. I swore that I would fast until I died. And in the hysteria of that moment, when everyone around you is sleep deprived and controlled and brainwashed to believe that the leader we were following was an incarnation, and that just like Jesus was once being persecuted, he's being persecuted now. Are you going to be like a Judas who stands with his attackers, or are you going to be somebody who's with him until the end? It's hard to rebel against something that you think is good. And this is why people in Jonestown massacre drank the bloody Kool-Aid. Not bloody, the poisoned, drank the poisoned Kool-Aid. This is why so many people want to prove their worthiness to be disciples of frauds, because they're made to believe in the us against them mentality, the divide and conquer mentality that cult leaders use to trap the minds of sincere seekers. When he told us that his life was in danger and that he needed us to do something, and what we could do for him was a fasting until death, we were willing to do that hunger strike, even knowing that it could be the end of our lives, because we felt it would be worth it to save him, so his so-called mission could continue. He reintroduced that concept in 2018 when he created what he called the Rudra Kanya order, which is essentially a harem of beautiful girls who he has dance for him. If you saw my interview with Ivana, who is the first of the Rudra Kanyas to actually leave and speak out, they were being groomed to do things like topless dancing and to try to break the taboo of sexuality publicly, which is very disturbing if you consider how things like that are perceived in India. Some of the other Rudra Kanyas have shared things that went on behind the scenes that it's not my place to talk about them, but very disgusting things he was doing to entrap these women. But he said in a public discourse that if you are one of his followers, or if you're an ex-follower, you may even remember it. He said that the Rudra Kanyas who served Sadashiva in the temples, if they knew that people were attacking Sadashiva, they would throw themselves from the roof of the temple to their death in order to protect Shiva. And he said his Rudra Kanyas are serving Shiva embodied as him, and that it was their spiritual duty to live that level of tyaga, that level of self-sacrifice. And so he has told the Rudra Kanyas they should be willing to die for him if he requests it. He also regularly praises people by saying, this one here, she's my sincere disciple, she would die for me. Kanna, would you die if I ask you to? And they'll say, yes, Swamiji. And then he'll praise them and make everyone else feel that they should aspire towards that level of brainwashed subservience. They should be willing to do it. Now, I find it very scary to consider the fact that he gets a thrill out of people's willingness to die for him. It's very psychopathic. He does not care about their quality of life. He doesn't provide his followers with adequate food, adequate sleep. He deprives them of adequate sleep. He doesn't care if they are overwhelmed, stressed out, having mental breakdowns from being constantly yelled at and abused and ridiculed by the people he orders to yell at them, abuse them, and ridicule them. He doesn't care about anybody except himself. And when there's a psychopath being worshipped by people who care more about him than they care about themselves, and he cares more about himself than he cares about them, if he feels his life is threatened, if he really feels push come to shove and catches wind of the fact that, say, Interpol is about to arrest him or the FBI is onto him and they've smoked him out, if he feels like his life is over as far as being worshipped, if he feels that everyone will realize he's a fraud and his narcissistic, predatory self can't tolerate not being worshipped and praised, he is not going to just commit suicide to escape it. He would want to bring everyone else with him. He would tell us that Aksharadam, or the higher realm which he claims to preside over in like Shiva Loka or the cosmic Kailasa, he told us he will bring all of his most loyal followers with him to Aksharadam when his life comes to an ending. He even described in great detail how he will die in the center, followed by his inner circle, followed by the next circle, followed by the volunteers around. And it didn't really hit me until recently when I was talking to another ex-follower of his who reminded me of this, who said that she always wondered, how could he be so certain that they would all die at the same time? When he would tell us that he will take samadhi, that he will leave his body in the center, and that all these people will be around him in consecutive formation in a mandala-like shape, how was he so certain they would all die together? And this is what makes me think he could be planning a Jonestown. And he has the psychopathy for it. He has the lack of care for other people's lives. He has the audacity to believe that it would be a blessing to them to die for him. Whether he actually believes it or whether he pretends to believe it in order to make all of them do his bidding is irrelevant. I've had people ask me, do you think he actually believes he's an incarnation of Shiva? And quite frankly, I don't care, because I know that he is not. And I know that he is hurting people. So whether he believes he'll be taking them all to Kailasa, whether the Hale-Bop guy who was leading that crazy cult, what was it called? You know, the one where they all committed suicide together wearing the Nike shoes in that bunker, whether Applegate, I think was his name, whether he actually believed that they were going to ride the tail of that comet to God or not, either way, he killed all of his followers. Whether Jim Jones actually believed God was talking to him or not, he murdered all of his followers in Jonestown and the authorities who had come to rescue his people. And I really think Nithyananda has the same level of delusional, crazy evil within him, that if he felt cornered, he would take everybody else out with him. So let's not let him do that. Don't tell me to move on with my life and just be happy, happy, love, and light if I'm trying to save people from falling to their doom. If you're standing on a mountain and you see somebody like backing up, taking a selfie, and they're approaching the edge of a cliff, and you know that it's 100-foot drop and you don't want them to die, it's not negative to say, hey, stop, you're getting close to the edge, I'm worried about you. And whistleblowers who speak out about cults, we're not dwelling on the negativity of the bad experience we had, of the PTSD that we're stuck with from the cult abuse. We're not dwelling on negativity when we go public and tell other people, hey, come out of there, it's a trap, I'm worried about you. So if you feel like you're justified in continuing a devotion towards somebody who is a rapist, a pedophile, a violent, dangerous criminal who may potentially be the next Jim Jones, instead of trying to convince me to stop my whistleblowing, take a good, honest look at yourself and see why you're okay with supporting someone who is a toxic, abusive, negative, dangerous influence on the lives of people who trust him. That's basically my message for today. I had little notes on my computer here that I was going to get into, but I think I'll save those for another video. This has gone on long enough. But thank you to those who are supportive of this work that I'm doing. Thank you to everyone who has understood the necessity for this whistleblowing. If you have a friend or a relative who is currently following the fraud who calls himself Nithyananda, if you haven't heard from them in over a year, you don't know where they are, all you know is that they went to him, surrendered to him, and then ghosted social media, file a missing persons report. I really encourage you to not just sit back and wait for some tragic news to come in one day about the person you love. Even though the cult does things like force daughters to lie brutally about their father, even though the cult has done things like falsely accuse me of crimes on social media to try to destroy my reputation, be willing to do what's necessary for your loved ones. And I should also point out, they are not as powerful as they used to be. In the early days of Arti and Lenin and Vinay speaking out and talking about his abuse, there wasn't as much of a push to get him to justice. There wasn't a warrant out against him. There wasn't a blue corner notice by Interpol. He wasn't on the run in hiding. Now he is at a greater disadvantage because he is being exposed for his fraudulence and his racketeering and his rapes and his sickness. And so he doesn't have unlimited resources to attack us the way he once did. If he abused you, it is not negative victim mentality, bad shit for you to speak out against the abuse he did to you. You have the right to reclaim your self-sovereignty and to let go of the fear of him because he cannot hurt you. No curse that he utters will ever hold you back spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally. He does not have the power. He is not a true guru. And so exposing his crimes is not guru droha. You are safe. You are free to do as you will. And if you feel that he has hurt you, it is your right, and I would say your responsibility, to speak out against his crimes. Don't be another Mama Nisha to leave his organization and leave everyone else wondering why you left. Don't be another Jnana Swarupa Swami to run away and keep all the abuse to yourself. Be somebody who puts an end to his violence, to his molestations, to his racketeering, to his fraudulence, to his violent temper tantrums where he belittles and humiliates people. Stand up for those who can't, who are still brainwashed by him. And don't worry, because we're going to win this. The same way Keith Raniere went to prison on multiple life sentences, I have a very strong feeling so will Rajasekharan. Let's just ensure he doesn't take out any other innocent lives when he goes down. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. If you have any specific questions about this cult, let me know in a comment. If there's any crystals or gemstones that I make in my jewelry, like the necklace I wore today, let me know. I'd like to do some more crystal healing videos. I might do another Moldavite video soon, but I'm gonna try to balance that with cult exposure as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.